Well, today we are in our third look at healthy relationships, and we've been looking at practical insights, practical wisdom, and wisdom that we find in our sacred literature that helps us to understand the dynamics of relationships and how to improve them. In the first week, if you weren't with us, the messages are all online on our YouTube channel and our Vimeo channel as well. But in the first week, we took a look at the foundations of healthy relationships. What do they look like? So that we can recognize when we're on track or when maybe we're off track in a particular relationship. What are some of the basic principles that undergird all healthy relationships? And then we explored a bit about the idea of love not being a feeling, at least not the way we use it so much in a spiritual context, but really being a verb that connotes with the idea of action or behavior, and how skillful behavior based in choice, conscious choice, is an important part of developing a foundation for a healthy relationship. And then last week we took a look at the idea of building trust and transparency. How do we build trust in a relationship? What does it look like to be a trustworthy person? What does it mean to be transparent, to be willing to reveal a bit more of ourselves, to be vulnerable, to bring our authentic selves into a relationship? And today we're going to look at, as I said, the very broad topic of communication, which when we think about it is a very key component to relationships, that a lot of what causes relationships to fall apart or to become challenged and difficult has to do with the way we communicate, or the fact that we're not communicating, or we don't know how to communicate in a skillful way, or we don't even know what it is we're really feeling, and therefore we don't know how to ask for what it is that we might need to have be different in a relationship. So today, as we take a look at communication, we're going to be looking at three specific areas. We're going to be looking at communication itself. We're also going to be looking at the tendency that we sometimes have in relationships to protect the need to be right. We'll take a look at what it's like to heal that need. And then we'll touch upon conflict resolution, which is also a part of being able to communicate in a healthy way. I'm not so sure that there is any relationship, any solid, healthy relationship, that has not had times of conflict and difficulty. And the fact that we may have conflict and difficulty in a relationship doesn't mean that the relationship is bad. It means that something is trying to come to the surface for us to take a look at, for us to communicate about, and hopefully in the most skillful sort of way. It is my belief that no matter how much progress we have made individually in becoming better communicators and more skillful in sharing our thoughts and feelings and listening to another, that no matter how much progress we've made, that we can always get even better at it. We can always tweak it a bit and become more skillful. So first, taking a look at communication. Communication is twofold. It has to do with how good we are at listening and how good we are at speaking. Let's take a look first at the listening part. The listening in some ways might seem obvious. I'm listening if you're talking and I'm not saying anything. Is that correct? No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. You could be talking and I might not be saying a word, but you might not have one iota of my attention. What might I be doing as you are listening or as you are speaking? What might I be doing? Thinking about what you're going to say. I hear that from all over the room. I might be arguing silently in my mind with what you're saying. I might be wishing you would hurry up and get to the point and take a breath. Have you ever waited for the person to take a breath and go, as soon as they take that breath, then you jump in? And all they were doing was taking a breath to go on with the monologue, right? Some of you have lived with some of the same people I've lived with, right? Or known. are known. So we learn how to be good listeners by practicing, first of all, knowing what it means to be a good listener, and then practicing it. And active listening really takes a tremendous amount of attention, a tremendous amount of patience. It's an art, I think, because we are wanting to take in what the other person is saying. And then if we are really actively listening so that the other person can truly say what it is that is on their mind and on their heart, if we've been really listening, you know what? There would be a natural delay before we would be able to respond because we would not have been thinking about what our answer was going to be. Active listening in a conversation takes time in the conversation. It's not a quick conversation. When we are actively listening, we are listening not with the intention to respond, but with the intention to really take in what the other is saying, as well as what they are not saying, as well as how they are saying what they are saying. We communicate on many different levels. We communicate with our words, and some of us have great vocabularies and can think very quickly and are by nature or by practice very articulate, others not so much so. But words only carry part of the message. And unless we are truly actively listening, which means I'm deeply paying attention to what you are saying, how you are saying it, how you seem to be as you are saying it. Are you closed? Are you trembling? Are you joyful? I'm trying to take all of that in. The first time I really heard this idea expressed in such an easy to remember way, in such a powerful way, was from Stephen Covey in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that we are to seek first to understand, then to be understood. That is the ground, the foundation really, I think, of active listening, that we are seeking to understand before we are seeking to be understood. That's not easy to do, is it? Think of the last difficult and important conversation you had with somebody that you're close to. Somebody where the stakes were really high, where the relationship was really important to you. Think of that difficult conversation for a moment and think about what it takes to really put your own needs aside for a moment, or maybe for several moments, to be able to really seek to understand what it is they are trying to express to you before you get to what it is you want to express to them. I think Diogenes was touching upon something very, very true. You know, our Creator gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. I really think that that is an important thing to keep in mind, that maybe we are meant to spend twice as much time listening as we spend talking. So the way we listen is key to developing a good relationship, whether it's with our family or our significant other or in our business dealings. And then the way we speak really matters. The words that we choose really do matter. Some of us might benefit from building our vocabulary a bit so that we can be a little more precise in the words that we use, that we can be a little more nuanced in what it is we are requesting or saying or trying to communicate in terms of how we are feeling. Words are powerful. We all know that they can lift us up or they can do what? They can hurt us to the core, to the core. The Quakers have a practice, as I've shared with you before. The practice is to speak only if you can improve upon the silence. I think that is such a beautiful and noble thought. To speak only if you can improve upon the silence. I don't know where I heard this next, but you've also heard me share it before if you've been with me for any length of time. And it's the 3 questions to ask oneself before one speaks. The first is, and you need to get yeses on all three. Is it true? Is it true? Is what I'm about to say, what you're about to say, as we are trying to communicate more clearly, is what I'm about to say true? The whole truth and nothing but the truth, right? Is it true? The next, is it kind? Kind. That speaks to the motivation. Why am I saying what I'm going to say? Is it kind? And the third is it necessary? Is it necessary? I don't think that every single thing we think or feel in a relationship necessarily has to be communicated. I do think that there are annoyances and irritations that come up in a relationship, friction that comes up in a relationship that doesn't always have to be communicated or talked about. The only way I think we know whether it does or not is how long it lingers in us and when it starts to fester and how much we bring it back to our minds. But there are things that we will do with and between each other that are just irritating and annoying. Have you noticed that? We're just human. Sometimes we're not on our best behavior. Sometimes we're not as patient or skillful. And gosh, if we were to address every single solitary annoyance in a relationship, we would be living alone. We would be living alone. So I think there's a certain amount, and nobody can answer this for you. So I'm not about to stand up here and tell you what you should and shouldn't do in terms of do you communicate it or do you not. That's where your own inner work of knowing yourself comes to play, knowing what you can kind of get over as you maybe meditate on it or journal on it, and then really be able to let it go and have it be in the past and not something that comes back up. Or if it's something that you know, gosh, I really am going to have to have a conversation about this. Spiritual practices such as mindful speech and compassionate speaking go a very long way in our ability to speak in ways that really make a difference and can help to strengthen a relationship. I wanted to go through and look at some of the wisdom in our sacred traditions on communication, because this idea of listening well and communicating well is not a modern thing that we're trying to get better at. It has been written about in the Vedas. It's been written about in our Old and New Testament. It's mentioned in the Tao Te Ching. And whenever something is repeated in a variety of cultures and sources, it suggests to me that this is just kind of a universal thing that comes up for us. Would you not agree? I mean, when it kind of pops up everywhere, you go, maybe we should pay attention to that, right? In Christianity and in Ephesians, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. We don't use the word wholesome very much anymore, but I like that word. I know it's old-fashioned, but I like it. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it might help those who listen. In James, my dear brothers and sisters, listen carefully. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and even slower to become angry. I added the word even to slower to become angry, but listen carefully. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Proverbs, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Would you not say that that's still true today, right? Another Proverbs, to answer before listening, that is folly and shame. And in a way, if we are thinking about what we're going to say in the silence as the other person is speaking, we are actually doing what this proverb is warning against. We are coming up with our answer in our head first, right? Because we haven't really been listening. We've been figuring out our words. To answer before listening, that is folly, and that is shame. In Buddhism, one of the noble eightfold noble paths is right speech. I'd say the Buddha must have thought that was really, really important to say of the 8, one of them is right speech. Right speech. Is it kind? Is it true? Is it necessary? The words of the Bible, does it build up, lift up? What is the intention behind it? Have I listened before jumping in to add what I want to add? In the Tao Te Ching, those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know. Boy, do I feel vulnerable standing up here saying any of this with that. There's wisdom in that, though. There is. I've learned over a lot of years of being in ministry and in serving on different committees and different boards, both in Unity and in other nonprofits, that oftentimes it is the one who is the last to speak in a meeting where ideas are being shared or problems are being dissected and trying to be solved, that often it is the one who is the last to speak that can have the most powerful idea or question or bit of information to interject into the meeting. And often the one who is the last to speak is the one who has really been listening to everyone else who has been speaking and kind of taking all of that in before sharing. In the Vedas, which are the ancient Hindu scriptures, they emphasize the importance of speech as a divine faculty. I've never quite thought of it that way, but as a divine faculty, and equally they talk about the importance of really being able to listen. So building a healthier foundation for a relationship, looking at where we might have a little room for improvement in our communication practice. It may be on the listening side, it may be on the speaking side, it may be on both sides. Second area I wanted to have us take a look at is healing the need to always be right, or at least correcting the behavior of others. Have you ever had a relationship with someone who tended to have a real strong need to always be right? Raise your hand if you've ever had, not all of us, but quite a few of us. How does that feel in that kind of relationship? Is it one that you go, oh, I can't wait to spend as much time as possible with that person. I wish that they would be the person that I would have to spend time with if we were on a deserted island? Probably not, so why not? Why not? It's annoying, right? It becomes like everything becomes a contest. And there are times, I do believe, there are times where being right and standing for it and showing the other, no, what I am saying to you here is right, is appropriate. I'm not talking about that. It's healing the need to always be right. To always be right. I had somebody in my life that would say, I'm always right even when I'm wrong. Really? This is a poem, I almost have it committed to memory, even though I haven't said it in many years. It's a poem that I remember Reverend Robert Stevens. Some of you in this room remember him. He was the founding minister of what is now Unity San Diego Church on Altadena. He was my minister. I adored him and learned so much from him. And I remember him doing some sort of talk on relationships and communication. And he shared this poem. It's was written by Don Blanding, who was called the Vagabond Poet. And see if you don't get the intent of this. It's called the Eternal Triangle. Marriage, my dear, is a triangle. Your angle, our angle, my angle. And the usual cause when we do wrangle is the question of I, us, or you angle. I object when you say that the sure angle of our angle ought to be your angle, when I know that a right angle triangle must be based on a right angle, my angle. And then the fight began. Have you ever been in that kind of dynamic, right? You know, we won the argument, but we damaged the relationship. I've been in situations, situations with couples where you can feel where it's starting to come. That one has just said something, no, we took that trip on this date, or no, it was this number of years ago, or no, the thing cost that. And the other starts to say, oh, no, it was this, and back and forth. And you're just watching this ping pong ball go, over the most ridiculous thing. And you know it's not about the thing, right? It's not about the thing. Don Miguel Ruiz suggests that the need to be right is a result of trying to protect the image we want to project outside. I think that's an interesting thought to play with, and to maybe gently hold for ourselves as a practice of self-awareness. If we find ourselves in a conversation with another where we're really trying to convince the other that they're wrong and that we're right, and it's over something that really doesn't matter, okay? Something that really, really doesn't matter. To stop and consider what Don Miguel Ruiz was saying here. The need to be right is the result of trying to protect the image we want to project outside. Is that what's going on here? I think when we stop and ask ourselves, this little tussle that I'm in right now, or we're trying to convince the other person that they're wrong and I'm right about whatever it is, does the thing really matter? If it really matters, then yes, stay engaged in the conversation as skillfully as you can. But if it doesn't really matter, then stop for a moment and ask yourself, what's more important? Proving who's right in this, or protecting protecting the relationship, caring for the relationship? I think that takes a certain amount of emotional maturity, and it certainly takes a little bit of time. It's not that being right is never good. There's nothing wrong with being right. It's the need to be right all the time that hurts our connecting with the other, that hurts our peace in the relationship with the other. So that's an element to take a look at. And then the last that I want to share with you in regard to this part of healthy foundations for relationships has to do with resolving conflicts. Conflict in a relationship, I think we need to look when we are talking about the idea of resolving conflict in a relationship. I think it's important to look at the relationship itself first. I don't think that the way that we resolve conflict in a relationship is always the same. I think it is colored by the relationship itself. So a relationship that you have with your spouse or your significant other, with a parent or a child, someone that you're very, very close to, I think requires much more engagement and willingness to deal with whatever the issue is than, say, a conflict that you might have with a coworker or even a neighbor where the stakes aren't so high because the relationship is not as central to your life. Does that make sense? And so to me, where it's important to build the skill and take the time and to practice is in the relationships that are most important to us. And it is also probably those relationships that we sometimes are least inclined to want to do it, because those are the relationships that we care so much about, right? And we either don't want the awkwardness of the conversation, or we're maybe afraid we're not going to be able to express ourselves clearly enough, or we're concerned that if we do, how the other will take it. And so sometimes the very relationships that matter the most to us, where there is conflict that's arising, may be the ones that we kind of go, oh, I wish I could just put this over here. Am I speaking just to myself, or? Okay, I didn't think so, right? So it's okay. What that suggests to me is that in those kinds of situations of conflict, we may need a little bit of time to kind of think through and be with what is it that we're feeling, what is it that we are wanting to communicate? What is it that we are hoping will come as a result of entering into the conversation that may be uncomfortable for us? What is it that we're wanting to accomplish? So we may need to give ourselves a little bit of time to do some of that work. That's not a problem as long as we're doing the work and not just avoiding the issue. Big difference there. So I'm going to give you kind of my list of things that I try to keep in mind when I am trying to be in a conversation with another person that has conflict at it, where we've had maybe a disagreement or something has come up or something that needs to be shared hasn't been shared. Here's the first one, and you can do it with me. Take a breath. Just take a breath. Just take a breath. Just take a breath. And oftentimes when I take that breath, I will also lead with my intention for the conversation is for the relationship to be stronger and better, and that I may not express myself as clearly as I would like to. And if I'm feeling nervous, I will even say, and you know what, I'm feeling a little nervous. So maybe you can just hold that awareness as we go into this relationship. So there's a certain vulnerability there, a certain authenticity, but taking a breath and centering myself, then opening it up for the other to speak and listening with the intention to understand. What is it that they need to say to me? What is it that's going on for them? And then when it is my turn, and sometimes the listening may come after I do my sharing first, then I listen to them. It depends upon the particular situation. But when it is my time to speak and to share what it is that is happening inside of me, to work really hard to do something that I'm sure all of you know is the right thing to do, is to use what kind of statements? I statements. I statements. I feel, or I sense, or I think, or I wonder, or I'm struggling with. Not you. I imagine that not too many of us in this room had that modeled really, really well for us. That's not the tendency we have. The tendency most people have in talking about something of conflict is to point the finger verbally by using you statements. So using I statements, being respectful in how I communicate whatever it is, especially if it's a disappointment or a hurt. I felt hurt by such and such. I feel misunderstood, or whatever it is. The person may not agree. The person may not be able to give me whatever it is I may be asking for. But what we can be certain of is if we do not communicate it, and if we do not ask for what we would like to have happen, the chances of having it happen become very, very slim, if not zero. Empathy is an important part of the process of that kind of communication. It can't be rushed. It's the kind of conversation that might take a lot longer, where you can't be waiting for the other person to finish what they're going to say, so that you can jump in. It needs the time. What do they say with a good bottle of wine? It needs time to breathe. The conversation needs some time to breathe. Looking for common ground. I said that in a relationship that really matters to you, a significant other, a parent, a child, your best friend, looking for common ground is really important, because when we're dealing with a conflict in a relationship and we're trying to bring it to the surface to talk about it, what sometimes happens is we see the relationship only in terms of that thing, that slice of our time with that person, that thing that's up for us, that thing that we're hurt about or angry about, or feel mistreated about. And we forget that slice, that conflict, that incident lives within a whole range of a history we've had with this person. Because Again, remember, I'm talking about the relationships that really, really matter to us. And reminding ourselves of that the common ground is on the other side of whatever that issue is right now that one or both of us are struggling with. Does that make sense? Keeping that perspective important, keeping that perspective in focus is important. Taking responsibility for your part. That's hard. That takes humility, right? To be able to say, I could have handled it differently. And owning that. Have you ever been on the receiving end of somebody in a conversation like the kind I'm describing, where the other person has said to you and has admitted taking responsibility for their part of the misunderstanding or conflict? Have you ever been on the receiving end of that? How does that feel? It's healing, isn't it? Because I think a basic need that we have as people is we want to be seen. We want to be seen. If we have been hurt, if something has really damaged the relationship, that hurt part of us, I think, wants to be seen by the other that we care so much about. And just hearing those words, especially, we can tell if they're genuine, can do so much to take that hurt and that pain away. So I've shared with you just some of the pieces for me that I try to practice, and I don't do it perfectly, but I've got kind of a map in my mind and in my heart of how to approach those conversations that are difficult so that they don't brew, so they don't become so big that eventually the relationship falls apart and that warm intimacy that we felt with the other, that closeness we felt with the other, becomes flat and empty. In Matthew 5, which is part of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus gave, in my opinion, those recorded statements, recorded as of memory, are some of his best teachings. He said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God." That's what we're talking about in relationships. When there's conflict, it only takes one to begin the healing process, one that is willing to step forward and move into that energy of peacemaking. Peacemaking does not mean that you don't admit what you were feeling or where you were hurt. It doesn't mean you ignore that, but it means that after you speak about it, you can do what? You can rise above it. So I've given you a lot this morning. I know I've given you a lot. And it's always my hope, no matter what message I'm sharing on a Sunday, it's always my hope that even if it's just one idea or one thought, one word that kind of sticks in your mind, that you'll walk away with that one thing. We don't need to do everything to have our lives become better. When we take one idea that seems to strike a chord of truth in us, it's like a gift. It's like a gift from Spirit. And when we take that gift and we unwrap it by practicing it, using it in our lives, over time, we're going to find that that gift has blessed us in such significant ways because we will have moved in a slightly different direction, and that direction will be a better one. Namaste.